High Noon tells the story of Marshall Will Kane, who is about to retire and leave his small town with his new wife, Amy. Their plans are interrupted when Kane learns that Frank Miller, an outlaw he once sent to prison, is returning on the noon train to get revenge. Miller's gang is already in town, waiting to join him. Kane decides to stay and face the danger, believing it's his duty to protect the town. However, when he asks the townspeople for help, they all refuse out of fear, leaving Kane to focus the gang alone. Even Amy, a pacifist, plans to leave because she cannot accept the violence that is about to unfold. As the clock strikes noon, Miller and his gang confront Kane in a tense final showdown. Kane manages to defeat them with unexpected help from Amy, who comes back and saves his life. Afterward, Kane throws his badge to the ground in disgust at the townspeople's cowardice and leaves the town with Amy. The film is a powerful story about courage, duty, and standing alone in face of danger. High Noon is a classic Western film that stands out by using similar symbols, famous actors, and a focus on character drama instead of action. These elements come together to create a powerful story that captures the essence of the Western genre while also feeling unique and memorable.
High Noon has a plethora of classical Western iconography, using imagery that has become tied to the genre, from its characters to its setting, and even the visual style used by the filmmakers. The movie embodies the timeless characteristics that define Westerns. It embraces the genre stereotypes and builds its story around them, making the film a classic example of what a Western is supposed to be. For example, High Noon's setting is a small town with a railroad, which is often seen in classical Western media. Buildings found within the town that tie into Western iconography include both the town's church and its saloon. High Noon also uses most of the common iconographic characters, including law, such as main protagonist Marshall Will Kane, as well as Sheriff Deputy Harvey Pell. Other iconographic characters include the bandits, the Miller Gang, a Mexican, Helen Ramirez, and even some Native Americans, though they are only background characters. The film also harps on typical Western film themes. High Noon's plot is all about revenge, as the Miller Gang wants to kill Marshall Kane to get revenge for sending Frank Miller to prison. The film also uses classic Western filming techniques, like wide shots and the protagonist riding off into the sunset. It even has the classic Western The End text with a Western-style font.
Like other film genres of its time, Westerns are no stranger when it comes to star power. Now, long after the heyday of Westerns, predominantly from the 40s through 60s, you have names such as Clint Eastwood, John Wayne, and James Stewart who have become synonymous with these kinds of films, and they've really cemented the kinds of characters one expects when viewing them. And that would often be represented through this stoic yet endearing male character who's oftentimes a lawman or a drifter of sorts. However, these iconic film stars represent something more than just the characters they play, for they are a reflection of the culture, be it through the norms, attitudes, and political climate of the era the film was produced and released. High Noon is very much a product of its time, one that uses the likeness of its actors to promote an agenda that mirrors the beliefs of the mid-20th century United States. Gary Cooper was a prominent Hollywood star from the 1930s and on, who secured a wide array of roles at the time, predominantly in westerns and war films. In High Noon, Cooper plays the stoic yet protective, in parentheses, resigning Marshal of Hadleyville, Will Kane, who remains in town to protect it against Frank Miller at the possible expense of his newfound marriage. In the time that this film was made, many would assume that Cooper's character would have this air of hyper-masculinity, but an article by George Tolles actually reveals a lot more about the character. Now, westerns often feature men in dominant roles, which aligned with the views of the era when the film premiered in the United States. And while these types of characters tend to enforce patriarchal norms, Cooper's portrayal rather demonstrates the attraction toward characters audiences can relate to. those who are humble and not afraid to jump in the face of adversity for the sake of others. As for the female lead, actress Grace Kelly appeared in numerous films playing characters often of prestigious backgrounds, such as Lisa Fremont in Rear Window and Tracy Lord in High Society. In High Noon, which was one of Kelly's premiere roles, she plays newlywed Amy Kane, who urges her husband, Will, that they flee the town to avoid conflict with Frank Miller and his gang, which causes strain in their marriage. As for Kelly's character, she is a Quaker and a pacifist, but in the film's climax, she kills one of Frank Miller's men to help her husband in the struggle. In the 50s, the United States was no stranger to devaluing women's roles. However, though Kelly's character embodies traits that fall in line with the perceived views of women, she ultimately goes out of her way to help her husband. Don Graham's article, which is an analysis of High Noon's women, actually reveals the strength and perseverance of its female characters that many westerns of the era appeared to lack. As for Kelly, she displays femininity and defiance with this role and others living up to the status quo while at the same time challenging it through her ability to step above stereotypes.
High Noon is considered to be a melodrama because of the focus of characterization rather than the typical action westerns. The only action really in the film is the final shootout with Marshall Kane and the Outlaws. The story follows more of Kane's struggle with either the drama of his personal life or the personal life of others around him. Also, the actions are dramatized to fit the feeling of the characters and their pasts, giving every character some sort of depth in the story. For example, Kane's wife, Ramirez, the bartender, and other townsfolk that are approached by Kane are portrayed in such an overdramatic fashion, either in reaction to Miller, the antagonist, coming back, the marshal, or even to each other, fitting that melodramatic style. In the film, we learn about Marshall Kane's wife, his relationship with the townsfolk, and his relationship with Frank Miller, who's out to seek revenge on Kane. There he becomes the only brave one in town to face Miller. We also learn that there's a relationship with Miller and the townsfolk that discourages them to stand with the marshal. While this happens, his wife becomes suspicious of him because of his past with Ramirez. She believes that she's the reason why Kane doesn't want to leave town. The plot is more invested with the telling of the stories rather than the action behind it. Melodramas follow the idea of going more in-depth with the stories and exaggerate their drama, usually having more than one at a time, like in High Noon.
High Noon combines classic Western imagery, a star-studded cast, and a focus on character-driven drama to create a memorable film. It uses familiar symbols and themes to stay true to the genre, while the performance of Gary Cooper and Grace Kelly elevate the story by focusing on character relationships and emotion instead of constant action. High Noon offers a deeper and more engaging look at themes like duty, fear, and bravery, making it a standout in the world of Western films.